How's it? And welcome back, sports fans. Another edition of Moving the Needle podcast. This one's been a long time coming. He's been on my list, maybe not courageous enough to reach out, but then I saw he's done some media, he's done some podcasts, and I go way back getting my ass whipped by Mr. FABIEN BAREL, and a lot of people see him a little bit on the circuit, but I think a lot of the younger listeners and the new people to mountain biking will not know your history. So I have to give a bit of an intro. I mean, you're a multiple world champion, junior world champion, enduro world champion. From what I can see, every bike you decided to touch, you were able to get to the top. And that's what I always respected about you in those days, is like you were all about optimizing performance. That's a word you'll use probably today, but kind of like to the beat of your own drum. You didn't really care if someone was like, hey, you're in a half skin suit, or you were very good at using the rules to your advantage, which at the time it kind of annoyed me because it was tough to get to your speed. But now researching and looking back, Fabian, I've got so much respect for what you've actually given to the industry, and I can relate that it seems like you just love being involved in the racing and being at the races and helping these riders. So thanks for making the time. I can't wait to pick your brain.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm super happy to actually join and have a good chat together. And we definitely have a common passion about mountain biking and racing. So I'm sure it's going to be a great chat.
And I ironically was looking for your email address or which to use. So then I searched and I found 2011, maybe. I must check 2012, checking in on team movements. And then the latest one to you was 2015, where we exchanged some messages. But and I said, there seems to be some rumors about Canyon, who people can see in the background that you're now with on the DH team. I said, if there's any movements, can we have a chat? And he said, it is still rumors. There is no movement, but I'll let you know if it changes. So it never worked out.
That's cool.
But
I like that. That's cool.
I definitely, during the times of changing teams and seeing what you're doing, I clearly back then was ready to get mentored by you or get some help or desperate for a ride. I don't know how I don't know. I can't remember back then.
Yeah. Well, for sure, 2015 was actually the start of the commitment on the DH bike with Canyon, and to try to develop the very first tender. And yeah, I'm not surprised we had chatted at the time. That's for sure, because it was definitely something that was on my radar. And I guess people like you reach out to me because I think people know how much I love racing, but they also know that I love racing for myself, but also for others. And I really like to exchange with others and teach to each other and learn and grow with each other through racing. And I think you know that and people know that. So that's probably why you reach out at the time.
No, definitely. I mean, anything you've been involved, been pushing the limits, thinking outside the box. You got that engineering background. Was that easier for you to step away from racing because of this engineering that you studied during riding and had a passion for? Because it seems from my side, you stepped away from downhill. You had a shorter downhill career, I think, than my downhill career, even though I came in later. But I went to 32, but it feels like you stepped away a little bit earlier.
31 years old. It was in 2011. And yeah, for sure. I think, I'm a very pragmatic and rational person, and I set myself goals. And when I got into mountain biking and be passionate by mountain biking, I said, well, I want to become pro. And the day I become pro, I said, well, I want to win the junior title, right? It was clear in my head. And when I got junior world champ, it was also clear in my head that I wanted to be world champ with in elite. And I clearly very early understood that on the technological aspect of the sport was very important. And that's why I actually passed my mechanical engineering degree alongside my racing career, to be able to discuss with the engineers and be able to have a strong communication with those guys. And back in the days when I finished my engineer degree was with my days with Kona in Canada. That was actually a lot more, I would say, dedicated to freeride at the time. And we made the owners into a very random discussion and say, guys, we need you to put your bike out there. For sure, freeride is a big one, but racing is something that is important. And I really pushed boundaries with the bike back in the days with my mechanic Paul Walton, that you probably remember. And that was one of your mates from South Africa. And we definitely push boundaries and technology at the time very, very far. And my mechanical engineering skills really helped me to communicate and push the development of the product. But also, I quickly realized that the link with the industry was very important, and that along winning myself, I wanted to get brands and people out there to win. So I would say that the sharing part of my race career, because I still believe it's part of my race career, I started very early, and I guess it's one of the reasons that I stopped racing also in my early days.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, and it seems like there was a link that the downhill and your passion for performance pushed you a bit to the mechanical engineering. Like, okay, there's a gap to talk to the engineers. You think you would have studied something like that if it wasn't for bikes?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not,
Okay.
to be honest. I would have been more on the business side of things than the technical aspect. I think the reason I went really on the technical side of it was because of my passion for racing mainly, and yeah, it actually drew me down to the process of my thinking and what I wanted to do. Because right after Kona, we moved into Mondraker and developed the forward geometry, the zero suspension system with Cesar Rojo that you probably remember of as well. That was crazy about engineering, and then the great opportunity to move within Canyon that was just starting mountain biking at the time, or at least their own engineering and technology on mountain biking at the time was a fantastic opportunity. And you can tell that technology and performance has been, I would say, the red line of my past year.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Okay, 31 at the time, apart from Greg who went on and PD, and now that
Yeah.
there's a few guys, but I guess it isn't that early. I was just surprised because your pace was still there. I know there were some injuries that you fought back with,
Yeah,
so that
for
was
sure.
kind of my understanding. Like that's to me fascinating. I know why I retired. I know
Yeah.
I was not wanting to hit the ground as much anymore. I was burnt out of traveling and kind of the monotony of the one sport. As cool it is to train for downhill, you get a little bit burnt out. So that's why I kind of just asked, like, we're jumping quite far ahead because your history into it, I don't think many know how quick you took to the sport. But yeah, that, like, what is that self-talk after such a crazy career, which we'll jump back to about the results and your preparation, but like you've been quite far withdrawn from retiring. Like, looking back, do you think you could have gone a few more years? Are you super happy with when you hung up the boots?
Yeah, no, I think I could have gone on racing for a long time because my dedication, my physical capacities, my technical skills never been, I would say, never been the best of everyone out there. But I would say my approach of racing and my mental and my capacity of hard work was something that would definitely pay off in racing. And I could have gone for a long time, but I would say I always like to have like kind of a step ahead on life, and I definitely didn't want to wait and push until the end. I'm a person that likes challenge, and once I have and I reach one challenge, I want to go on. The only thing that I never did in my race career was World Cup overall. And I actually did it in 2023 on my e-bike. So it was not the same goal as obviously racing downhill, but it was something that I managed to achieve with more consistency in my mentality and with my brain, because I would say that at the time it was really hard for me to kind of contain myself of not giving 120% every race. Something that was my weakness was that I was not in capacity to do a race for fun, or a race just to play, or a race just to go get points. Every single race that I did in my racing career was to give my best and try to, combine that puzzle that we all dream about, because it's a unique emotion that when you get in the start, you want to raise your game, right? You want to be right up there in your capacity. It's not a matter of where you're going to rank yourself compared to each other. It's just a matter on that day, that time, with the bike, the physical capacity you have, bring your mental all the way up there to be able to exceed your the heart of what you know how to do. And this is what I was really passionate about. And that was, I would say, my weakness for playing the overall, but it's also what helped me to win some great successes.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's often one of life's positive traits that can be your weakness at the same time. So a positive trait that
100%.
helps you boost yourself for these world championship things, the French mentality of optimizing that performance and peaking for the one race, but then using that day to day, you can see, I think now Loic is why he will win less races in the history books is when he's going for the overall. And that's fascinating that you tell me that, because you also mentioned in your career, you've qualified many times fastest in qualifying.
Yeah, true.
Um, and you've quoted, it's very difficult to back that up. And even from a guy like you who is so optimized on the mental state, I kind of wanted to pick your brain because I felt you've worked hard on that. And that's somewhere where I'm hard on myself. I go, okay, I think that was more of my weakness, is performing when the pressure was really on, not the pace at a World Cup. You know, I could perform at a lower stake race, but it's not because I got to World Cup and the pace went up. I could handle that. It was the nerves at the top of the hill, qualifying fourth. It's quiet at the top. And you've said, oh, okay, I've qualified fastest many times in my career, but to back that up is something unique. So what is that like for you, you know, looking back and be like, you worked so hard on the mental and you were so good at world champs, but then at World Cups, I guess, is that just the nature of the sport? You know, you can't win them all.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got a good point. It's like having the mentality to be able to contain yourself into a certain consistency when it comes down to racing. It requires yourself to ride at 97, 98%, or even 95. That's why this margin needs to be out there. And I would say where you take Lloyd being slow is that the way he actually approaches racing is really built and is really structured. It is not putting the risk factor so much into the game, which is something that is very different than Amory. Amory will play it all to
Yes.
actually get out there. So I would say I was more back in the days into Amory side, and Laurent is more like Nico Vouilloz side. If you remember back in the day, Nico would be able to nail a run and tell you within a second where he was going to match. Where on my side, I was more, I would say, with a certain engagement and head on fire to make my wings, which was more aleatory than it would have been for someone that is really building the run. And I learned how to do that for World Champ, and I was definitely missing that for the globality of the World Cup when I was racing at the time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like a season is a long time if you're saying you have to push outside your comfort zone skill wise and certain tracks. And it makes me think that you weren't willing to realize, okay, I'm not suited to this track. But at Worlds, you were able to like go far and beyond, even if it wasn't a track for you. But, you know, like it seems like, say, Loic will be like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm a podium is a great race. But it sounds like you sometimes saying, yeah, podium would have been a good race, but I just want to go as hard as I can and
Well,
maybe prove
you,
myself wrong. I want to try win it anyway.
you touched the point. You touched the point is that there was, I would say, maybe a bit too much ego in some races where instead of just accepting the level you were at, the state of things with the mechanical prep that you had. I mean, let's be honest. Back in the days, our bikes were not performance wise at the top of its game for every event. Nowadays,
Yes,
it's a bit different, but back in the days, it was completely different. And for me to accept to be second, third, or fourth was something that was not acceptable. And this was in
really.
my mentality. Like if someone, I know that someone was going to be like, let's say a second a minute faster on one of the track, I would gamble it to try to make it happen. I would not accept that weekend I was slower than him. And I think the maturity of racing, the professionalism, the getting to the approach that we got nowadays is something different. Where back in the days, it was more going on with anger, even if we were capable for a wide champ to, let's say, design a bike perfectly for that run that was putting yourself on the top of the game. It was a lot harder to do it for every weekend. And I would say that back in the days, probably only Nico would have that capacity to do so for so many years.
That's so fascinating because the ego is such a fascinating topic, right? And now maybe both of us with age can admit our egos. And
Yeah.
the ego, have you heard of a book called The Ego is the Enemy? It's
Yeah, I think I heard about the book. I didn't read it, but I heard about the book. Yeah.
yeah, it's a famous author, does a lot of stoicism and all sorts of other books. And I read that book late in my career, and it almost maybe will hopefully help me later in life. But at the time, I was like, yo, why am I doing this thing? Why am I trying to beat Brendan next to me. It's all the ego, you know. So the ego you need, it's a useful tool to get to the top of the mountain, but it can be the same tool that makes you fall off it. So it's interesting you say like it was my ego that could unravel me at all times, but it's also the ego that forces you to be competitive, to train, to say, yeah, I don't care that I'm fourth fastest on this course. I want to win. And that probably helped you more than it didn't, right? But yeah, the ego is such a funny thing. I even catch myself now. You can have it in a relationship. I want to win an argument. That's the ego. You want to be right.
Well,
That's the ego.
if you look at things, everyone wants to be number one as a pro athlete, and everyone wants to be out there for one reason: is that we all trying to exist. And trying to exist is trying to make sense to your life, and we all have a different approach based on our culture, on our education, on our path of life. We all have different vision of what that existence must be. And ego is playing a massive role in that way, and this appreciation. And that's why racing was the best human adventure I could have for myself, because you learn about yourself every day, first of all, but now in my position, you learn about others. And trying to be able to share and get someone else to perform is to try to go in someone else's brain to try to understand its functionment, what is actually working for him that was completely different than for you. And existing is something that we all want. We all have a different way to approach it. And ego is what us to make it be number one and be just right up there. And finding the right compromise between all those parameters is what is making a race run in downhill so much on the point. You can be the best rider in the world and the most talented rider in the world. If you come in the start gate and you fall into pieces, you have no chances to win. That's why the mental in any sport that is so short and so intense that we have into downhill, the mental aspect is what's gonna rise a good run to a great run. And this is what the athletes are really digging in right now. And I would say professionalism in the last 20 years, first of all, it was all about talent. Then people start to realize, oh, well, you need to have good bikes. So the mechanical aspect of things become involved. And suddenly we realized that physically we needed the athletes on the top of those bikes. So the physical aspect stepped in. And right behind, it came along the tactic of racing, that is becoming, I would say, a lot more into the discussion now with teams and strategy and the different structures. And mental approach is what is actually being the future for our top athletes to create even tighter consistency than they have right now. So I would say that the full package of a downhill rider now, with the history we've got, is definitely getting right up there. And we are living the heights of our sports and having, I think, a really bright future to see very, very competitive racing.
Yeah, no, you've summed it. You've definitely summed it up, and it just seems like you are very aware of the mental side and the preparation almost ahead of the game. I heard that you borrowed visualization, which is such a normal term now, and used to get a lot of shit for it at the top, right? Visualizing. Obviously, you were quite physical and outwardly showing the visualization. So people that are watching on YouTube, you know, Fabien was known for doing the track with his hands, with his eyes closed. And it's easy to poke fun at that because it is so new, or it doesn't look cool. It was a cool sport, right? Let's ban skin suits. Let's try get outside sponsorship, you know, all those things when Palmer was involved. But you seemed like, did that just come naturally? Like, was it this crazy upbringing where not a lot of people may know, but you guys lived in the same street as Nicolas Vouilloz, you and your brother, right?
Yep.
There was like this crazy amount of talent in the same road in France.
Yeah. In that same small road, we have 33 national, European, and downhill world champion jersey on one street of a village that is 1,200 citizens. So that's the joke. And on that street, there was Nicolas Vouilloz, but also Johan Barelli, that you might know, that lives in Canada now. And his older brother, Nico Filippi, that is coaching the Canadian cross-country team now, that was world champion in cross-country junior. So there was the four of us on that street, yeah.
So then nature versus nurture, like that to me is more a nurture thing, right? Because of the environment you were all in. Maybe Nico started with the genetic, he was like known as the alien back then, right? But I don't know, it just seems like you need the environment as well. It's like the Kenyan runners that are so fast. Okay, is it genetics or is it the 10,000 hours because they ran to school for all those years? So they had a lot more reps first. So I guess you need all of it, is what I feel.
I,
But what do you
I
feel?
think we had a massive chance that we had a great community really early, and mountain biking was a big one straight away in the south of France. And you may know Georges Edwards was the organizer of the Mega Avalanche and the Avalanche Cup, etc. You may know him, and he was the first one to organize races with Frederic Glo, who organized the very first enduro back in the days. 2 years later, and Jean-Pierre Brunier, the Loic's dad, was one of the pioneer with Claude Vergier, which was Laurie's dad.
Oh
So
my goodness.
all those people were actually creating a community, and around the community, we had a huge amount of trail network that was naturally instilled historically for farmers in our mountains. There was a playground that was super technical and I would say available for us to learn mountain biking in the 80s. And Nico took over and jumped on that and naturally created the dynamic for racing that was installed by those pioneers that I just mentioned. And Nico fall on that. I fall behind him, and then all the generation that just picked it up behind. So I would say this environment that you mentioned, along with the French Federation that was very dynamic, and Emmanuel Hébert that you may know is actually a big part of it as well, created right away a very good racing structure around that environment that gave us a great opportunity to have a real racing approach in the very early day of mountain bike racing. And you did mention the trend and the fashion and the coolness of the sport, because obviously mountain biking was born in America and came in with like a certain atmosphere around it. And coming from a proper racing background myself, and with the ego that you know from me, I didn't really give a shit about what people were seeking, and I was
So cool.
obviously trying to push my own boundaries and understand what was the rule, what was the framework, and whatever is in the framework to try to optimize it to win my racing. This what was my culture, and this was what I came from. And something you may not know is that coming back to the mental aspect of the preparation is that my early days of racing were actually really, really rushed. I started riding my mountain bike like in 93, 94. And I went straight into racing in 95. And I got picked up by one person locally that put me in a World Cup of Cap Dive, which is next to my house, put me in the sweeper over there. And I was just opening the race, right? And he said, "Oh, you have to give it all, and we see what's going on, and we'll see your rating. And I think you have great talent, so you know out there." And I went to that race and got the sweeper, and I got the 17th time overall, and I was 50 young at the time. And straight away, you know Max Commensal, and you know how he is with athletes and discovering new ambassador for the sport. He straight away went to me and offered me a 4-year contract from being a beginner to become a pro rider. And I ended up being in that situation, I would say, with no anticipation. And I was right away seated next to Cedric and Anne-Caroline and François Gachet at the time. And in 1996, when I jumped in my very first official pro career, it was way too much pressure for a 15-year-old kid that was going out of his village. And obviously, yes, I saw Nico doing his career, but it was just everything straight into my face. And ending up into that situation and this environment, I could not control myself for one reason, again, is that my ego was out there. I was like, well, I'm a pro. I'm 16. I proved that I'm capable to get there, but I need to win races. And I can tell you that at the time, I could not make 5 corners in my runs. I was on the floor every single run, every single races. And at some point after 2 or 3 months of racing, I said, well, I got to find a solution. And that's where I start to work with my brain and look at other sport and talk to other people. And I discover mental preparation coming from other sport. And right away in the late 90s, I really start to use those tools that were used into skiing, into motocross, to try to put myself in the best mental environment to perform and use my skills at the optimum and not at the maximum, which is a massive difference in terms of approach. So that's the way I came in the early days straight away into this mental aspect of the things and realized that it was a key tool to actually succeed.
That's so fascinating. So you did that yourself. Does your father help you with that to go dive into the mental side and look at these other sports? Did you what did that look like in reality? Right. It's all one thing to say, okay, I looked at my mental side, but what did that actually look like? Did you phone
Well,
some athletes? Like, how do you
yeah,
learn as a 15, 16-year-old? I
I,
mean, that's awesome that you spotted it so early, right?
Well, you've been clear. Is that I spotted it because every time I was hitting the ground, it was painful, and you have
Yeah.
to find solution, obviously. So I start to understand, and I try to talk to mountain bikers, but no one could really bring me any information. So I went into sports that was more professional, and luckily at the time I had a friend called Christophe Sayoni, who was like a pro skier, pro downhill skier, and I talked a lot with him to try to understand what was the approach and now going to a psychologist or realizing that you have to work on your brain and your mental is something that I would say is fairly casual nowadays in sport and out of sport. But back in the days, like you would go to I would say, psychologist when you have a real problem, when you were sick, you would not go to a psychologist just randomly. And this was something that was again really hard to accept the process and accept about yourself and realize that the only way to progress was to realize your weaknesses to solve them. And this was clearly one of mine because I knew that my physical preparation was on the top out there. I had the best bike at the time. My skills was more than great to perform in the 90s. So I knew that the only problem was myself. And realizing that and realizing this on the front of yourself in the mirror passed by some acceptation of who you are and also be very clear with yourself with who you want to be. And this is a massive step.
Yeah, that's super interesting and even valuable now. Who you want to be, right? You've got to act like your former or your future self, or act like someone you aspire to perform like. And that's something I worked with on a mental coach as well. And obviously, you said an interesting thing there. It was quite taboo back then, right? It's admitting a weakness
Sure.
to put that publicly. Now, Loic mentions he's got someone he speaks to. It's probably more of a life coach. As we know, often things that are going outside cycling can affect your performance as well. It's all holistic. So, but it is nice to hear that it is more accepted and it's not a weakness. If anything, you go, oh, he's working with someone. Well, if they do some good work, he's going to be more of a threat. That's what I hear when someone is working with a mental coach. I'm like, well, if they optimize that just a little bit, he's going to be better than he currently is, and he's pretty damn good currently.
Oh, you're 100% right. You're spot on. It's like working on yourself. Like back in the days, people would have beer in the finish line area to show that they would not be training and that they were party guys more than
Yeah.
professional athletes. It was the trend because even if you do one ride, you didn't want to mention about it. Now you
Yes,
have
yes,
pro
yes.
athletes that are posting on Instagram when they go do a road ride. So you actually see that the evolution of the sport and the mentality has grown, and it's true on the mental prep. Like visualization, you don't see people on the side of on the start gate the way I was doing it. But if you go to a ski race, you would see 90% of the guys working on visualization. And if you want a small insight, you might remember that race, 2007 in Volcano champs. That was one of the big one in my radar, and I won 2004, 2005, got injured in 2006, and it was a big marathon at the time between Greg, Sam, Hill, and myself. And I know that Sam was on top of the game. And unfortunately, I broke my foot in Whistler 4 weeks before World Champs. And there was no way, no chance I would miss World Champs again because I broke myself in 2006. And I said, well, there is no chance I miss this one again. And I talked to Paul Harton and I said, okay, well, we're going to find a way for you to prepare my bike. I went to see my doctor and I use we developed the carbon shoes, the cross country carbon shoes, where we took off the carbon area where my fracture was, and we injected silicones in this area to remove vibration from where the crack of the fracture was,
No
and
way.
I didn't train the child where I wanted. I never been really good with cold and marine, obviously coming from the south of France is not one of my traits, right? And I trained for about 3 weeks with, at the time, without MP3, sounds of rain and wind in my ears. And I was visualizing my runs within this environment, in the cold outside, to be able to put myself in this cold and rainy environment while I was doing the visualization of my run. And I visualized the run also again for 100 times. And I came onto my race week. I remember with my crutches going down the track on track walk. I did only 5 training runs where the bike was fully prepared by Paul. And I took the start with a mindset like if I was prepared the best I could. And I did second behind sign for, I think, if I'm correct, 0.77 second. But after the race, I explained all the process and I say, sometimes the silver medal is worth gold. Because if you manage to exceed yourself in whatever situation you are, that's where you push boundaries and you progress. And visualization and tools and the approach of the medical aspect is all things that is part of the sport. And I think nowadays, when I throw back myself, there is a lot of things that I anticipated to be true now, and very open-minded to people when you see all the part, these techniques of racing that we have nowadays. So this is a pride for me for sure, 100%.
That is fascinating because I've heard of studies, and I won't be able to cite which ones, but where a group of people were asked to visualize, say, bench pressing over a certain number of weeks, but like really accurately visualize, but they didn't do any training, and then the other group would do the training, but no visualization, just physically do the training, and you'll be very shocked to see that the people that were doing the correct visualization actually increase strength. And again, if I've butchered that, I apologize. But there are lots of these stories, and it makes me think like if you could have that attitude when you're fit in racing, I mean, you could be a powerhouse. It's the same as coming back from injury with low expectations, or Troy at Mount St. Anne just after having a baby. Maybe no expectations. I barely slept. Like, I'm just going to go have fun. His prep was not the same. He would almost under prepped, but it like takes the pressure off, that carefree attitude. Yeah, it's so fascinating to me.
On that topic, the way Troy stepped out of the plane in Mont Saint Anne, the way he arrived on site, the way track walked, there was no debate for me that he was going to win.
Really? What did you feel? What did you see?
His mentality and his approach was a no-brainer. For him, there was no debate. He came to win. And I think in racing and in life, we completely, and in nowadays science, we completely underestimate the power of brain. The power of your mental. In how many people, I will take the completely opposite example, is how many people become sick after an emotional case, like emotional impact. How many people has a massive drawdown, they got something emotional, and suddenly, a couple of weeks later, health issue appear. And that the complete opposite example to what you can draw to yourself when you actually strongly believe into something. When I would have an injury with my mental prep guy, I would visualize the cells on my body rebuilding my bone, rebuilding my fiber. I would visualize myself the mobility. When I broke my back in 2014 in enduro, I don't know if you remember this one. I badly broke my back and I was very close of not being able to walk again. I spent 1 month laying into a bed because I decided not to have the material in my vertebra, and I didn't want to be to be the vertebra to be fused. I wanted to keep my mobility, and I stayed a month on the bed looking at the ceiling, and every single hours I was visualizing 20 to 30 steps every single hour of that month, just to be able to have my muscles and the mobility of my fiber still ongoing when it was going to be the time to be moving. I rehabilitate myself in the water with like diving, not scuba diving, but with like oxygen. And I restart my mobility for about 2 or 3 weeks there. And when I've been able to walk again, it was the same way that it was a month and a half before. It's something that my body never forgot.
Wow.
And that's why I came back. I broke my back in April 2014, and I came back to racing in September 2014. And I won Finale Ligure on the final there. This is a moment of my life, or one of the moments of my life, where I really realized that if I wanted to do something, and if I was giving myself the chance to do it, anything is possible. The boundaries we have around ourselves are the one that we are building through our life. There is this expression where you grow for 20 years through an education and culture and with life experience, and you spend after the 60th years after that to heal from the first 20.
Phew, yeah. I'm now having.
I don't know if you heard that
youngsters.
expression.
I haven't heard it, but it makes full sense because I'm thinking about raising my son now, and I'm thinking about all the programming we have and if the schooling system is correct. Now, I know we've gone a little bit off topic, but the mental constraints that you put on yourself or people have put on you till you then put out into the world. But hearing you speak about that, Fab, thanks for sharing that. And I'm not surprised that's something you would have done. And you spoke about the mental side, and I just heard you knew Troy could do it, right? Do you think people self-sabotage themselves with their mental talk and their mental state? Like they've lost the race before they get there if you don't truly believe it.
It's exactly what I mentioned to a different scale. It's like the first 20 years of your life, you build boundaries around yourself through what we said, and then you try to solve it. It's the same thing with racing. When you build a race, you create your own boundaries. Look, you create your breaking points, you create your line, you create your speed, and then when you come to your race run, you create the frame of your race run, and you stick to that. But what I'm trying to say is that let's say that you believe about something else, and you push every little details a little further, then your boundaries just extends slowly, and that's where performance appears. And this all comes with your capacity to believe in what you can do, and every time you push boundaries, adapt your environment to go further. And this is an everyday work. And let's be honest, we are different every day. I am different today than what I was yesterday, and I'm 100% different today than what I'm going to be tomorrow, because we are bringing our mindset to a different attitude. And if you realize that all of us are like paddlers, the paddlers that you use for rhythm, for example, in piano or music.
You're gonna have to use a different terminology. I'm not quite a musician.
Yeah, so I know that you will understand. It's like if you throw something with a weight from left to right, and you completely opposite 100 of them in a different rhythm, at some point of time, they all go at the same pace. They all do. And that mentality and what you create in your brain is exactly what's happening. It's like you dial your body and your mindset to where it should go. So if you are pushing yourself every time a little further, and you set your own boundaries that you decided, but not what the environment decided for you, you can progress. Every day you can progress. And racing, the mental game of racing is just out there. You can be your best mate as much as you can be your worst enemy. And being out there every weekend is requiring an automatical process, because we are human is an animal of repetition, an automatical process that allows you to be in the same mood, the same mental motivation and mental strength every weekend. And that's the whole challenge of racing.
Fuck, that's fascinating. I knew this would be one of those types of chats, so we get into it, because was your attitude and mood at races clearly sounds like a choice? Because sometimes I was like, this guy is always happy, he's always positive. It's not physically possible for this damn guy to always be positive. Like, it's like, fuck, can we not just moan about something? But because some people thrive off that, right? And I'm not saying it's good. For sure, it's self-sabotage at points. Is that true? Did you sometimes say, like, I'm just purposely going to be positive, even if it's rain or shine, bike's not working, doesn't matter, I'm going to be the positive Fabien? Because that's what it seems like. It almost seemed fake, but it seems like it was a mental strategy.
It's true. You are totally correct. I'm waking up every day of my life to be who I want to be and not who I am. As rough as it sounds, I'm putting a line to myself with goals, with attitude, to be able to maintain within the values of who I want to be and the goals I want to set. It may sound very mechanical in the approach, but I would say being who we are is very easy. That's very easy. You can be moody. You can wake up every morning and be mad, and you can just smile on sunny days and be pissed off on the rainy day. But is it who you want to be? Is it what you want to show? Is it what you want to represent? Is it the example you want to give to your kids? This is all depends on your own choice. And it might sound very mechanical on the approach, but yes, I take 20 to 30 minutes every morning to wake up my body, wake up my brain, and set up myself to who I want to be from that day.
What does that look like? Like a morning routine, stretching,
Yeah,
meditation?
it's
I'm hearing gratitude. Like, I don't know if you call it that, but to me, your approach is a form of gratitude, being grateful for the
yeah,
day, being grateful to your
yeah,
future
it's
self. And then you have a choice to be more positive, even if you are naturally not feeling yourself that day or down. You still have a choice, right? I know people will be like, oh, it's easier said than done. Yes, it's a habit you've built. So what does this morning routine thing look like?
but that's exactly what you mentioned, is that just being able to put a bit of blood activation and get your heart rate up there. Take a very simple breath with the fresh cold air in the morning, looking at the sun rising, and taking the moment for yourself to set up your own energy inside the way you want it to be. And the vibration that you have inside is the vibration that you're going to go into and use during your day in every of your actions. And this is what you have to pre-down, to not let nature do it for you, but just driving the way you want by your automatical process that you have in your morning routine. And that's true also when you go at night. I can sleep in about 20 breathing movement. And this, if you look, for example, in something very different, that is the army. When people were into wars, they were doing micro sleeping. And micro sleeping, that means that you can sleep anywhere, any moment, within a very short amount of time, by an evening routine or a moment of routine that puts your body into sleep. And this is something you can learn and you can program your body to do. So what you do in the evening and what you do in the morning, one is going to kind of set up your night and the other one will set up your day. And it's all a matter of commitment of what you want to do and who you want to be. You can let yourself float in the river or hang yourself to the side of the river and decide to go where you want to go.
But that sounds like work, Fabien. What about the person who says that sounds like a lot of hard work? It sounds like effort.
It is hard work.
I
It is
agree.
hard work. But who say that life was just the fun part? It's hard work, but hard decision and hard work is what making the real happy moments. You cannot just wait for life to give you things. and especially good moments. And I would say racing and wins is something that you build every day, every second of your life. It's something that you dedicated 200%. For sure, you can have fun. I'm not saying that I'm not having fun. I love doing the sport. I have great time with my friends. I love to party, etc. But I'm just trying to be the person I want to be, and not naturally myself float into something that I would say world and society and habits and culture will drive you in. And this is my personality, but I believe that it's true for every single racer that is right at the top over there, is that at some point you realize that who you are is not sufficient, because who you are is your talent. But nowadays, talent is not sufficient to win. So every single pro athlete realize that they need to question about themselves, and they do so probably every single seconds of their own life to be able to progress. And that's true for Lloyd, that's true for Amory, for Loris, for any top athlete, for Greg for all those many years, even Steve, that has been one of the best ambassadors of our sports, as much as Nico. They are athletes, they are people that question about themselves to perform. And that's why they are all such a great persons in life, is that they're learning about the global process and they progress every day.
Yeah, it's almost like you can't be, you have to be self-critical, and it's almost draining to be a high-performing athlete. Like there's almost no off switch, right? It's always, even if you win or come second, it's always, what could I have done better? Then we work on that. And you have to self-reflect, and maybe that's hopefully why you can survive after a career, is you can self-reflect. Where can I improve? Okay, well, I'm weak here, I'm going to try do this job now. Or you're going into engineering. Okay, well, what do I still need to learn? And every day you can sort of self-correct. I love where you've gone with that. And you mentioned like you didn't give a shit. You had this ego to win, but you didn't have an ego to say, look as cool as Sean Palmer, or be cool like Steve Peat and have the beer in the finish line, because your goal was to win. I'd love to unpack some of those goals, and you, like this preparation of Fort William. I don't know how many people know about that. I didn't know. I knew you did all this funky stuff, and with the bikes and stuff, we knew a lot of it. But to that detail of the visualization, and I heard a story about the mind games that you did at Leger, and that wasn't, no, not mind games. It was a strategy to qualify slow, and it wasn't a weather strategy. It was to potentially have fellow competitors see your time. So that was a strategy.
Yeah, it's correct.
It's
No,
fascinating.
100%. In Léger, I mean, let's be honest. In Léger is in France, but there is more UK people and Brits than there is French out there. And I know that Steve was going to be a threat, and that he was going to be super fast out there. Greg was on the top of his game, and Sam Hill was coming out of
Sam
nowhere
Hill.
from the junior years, like pinning it. And in 2003, when I met the mayor of Léger, I signed the only free contract of my career. I signed a free contract saying I'm going to do one only thing for the next year and a half, is prepare myself to win Léger in 2004. And I signed a free contract with like a big bonus if I was making it, and a long-term contract after that to start the bike park, etc. But that was my only goal. And then from that moment I signed that contract, I spent the last, or the next, I would say, 15 to 16 months after that just focusing on winning Léger. And yeah, there was a strategy that was really clear, as much as my tire choice was a strategy there. I prepared the bike only for this race run, and everything was aligned and prepared. And for sure that when I said to the coach that I wanted to start early in Fire, it was a bit devastated for the organizers. Like, well, that's going to make a mess. If you do a great time and you start early, it's not going to be good for the show. You're going to stay on the podium for a long time. I say, guy, I don't care. If I manage to reach my goal and do a great time, the only thing I want is the last 10 guys, when they go up the gondola, there was the screen that was in the field right when the gondola was taking off. And all they would see, I wanted them to see my time and my name at the top of the board. That was my whole plan. And he kind of worked out. And if you talk to Steve, he actually saw my time and went back to the pit and take off the high roller and put a semi slick on back. Went up the hill, and if you look, his unfortunate crash on the last corner, he lost the back end with the semi slick, which is part of the game. I mean, Steve was fastest on that day, but you know how it is. Like he didn't pass the last corner. He was a second and a half ahead at split time. My second split was not great. I really tried to attack with the mud tires in the grass, and I made two mistakes where I probably lost 0.7 to 0.8 on that last sector. So he probably would have won if he didn't have this crash. And the mind game of the sport is a big one as well. It's part of the strategy. And actually, when this happened in Léger, it really reinforced my motivation for the year after to go back in Livino with another approach and be able to win in a completely different game and mindset again.
Yeah, that's crazy, man, and it's such a risk for PD to go to a semi slick. I mean, I would hope he'd practiced on his semi slick, because if he hadn't, and then he went up for a final on a semi slick, that's an interesting play on that track. I was there, and I wouldn't have wanted to ride a semi slick down that hill. So fascinating that was your strategy, right? And you had the mud tires for people that maybe missed that. Super unique, sort of. It was full mud tires at the time, or kind of cut down.
No, they were
Which
full. They were full because I knew that if I could make a good first split, I would make time on the second split. The second part after the obstruction, the big long jump that was in the field was all grass and off camera. And if you remember, I put like a floating brake on the bike at the time to be able to squat the bike and not have so much frontal mass transfer and be able to stabilize the chassis in those corners, because I was feeling very offset with the bike, and I made the choice of the mud tire just for that second sector. That was a big choice. But again, I don't know if anything could have gone wrong on that weekend, because I actually visualized that victory so much in my head that I would make everything in the world for the universe to align on that day for me. And it was something very special for me in the front of my own crowd and my friends and family. It was definitely the victory of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I have goosebumps because I was there, and obviously knowing PD and how many fans, and he's the people's champ. It was interesting, like energy, right? Because like their side would be like Fabien stole the race, and PD would have won. But I'll say this to him: you've got to get to the finish line to win the race, even if you're up at the splits, right? Because
part of racing, for sure.
it's part of racing, but also like if you're going that fast, you might be a little bit over your limit. If you have a crash, it's different if like the tire went flat on the way to the finish line, or the brake, that's a little
correct.
different. It's a little different. Like you won fair and square with that strategy. But when you say you work towards that race, so I've had worlds at home, and I probably didn't outwardly say I'm preparing for this race, because that I struggled with that outward pressure,
Yeah.
But for sure I did. I skipped races where at Crankworks, because I was like, I think these conditions are sketchy, and if I'm not committed, I could crash before the Worlds. That's my focus. So I know the feeling and how much pressure I sat with, wanting to perform at home or focusing on that one race. Like, how did you cope with that? Because it's so much pressure if you say, well, that's my whole year is this one race.
Yeah, I think it's very important to isolate in your mind, to isolate what's your priority and what's the reason for you to do it. I think when the pressure builds, we talked about the ego at the beginning of the discussion. When the pressure builds slowly, you quickly put into the balance, I would say, the eyes of the others and the pressure from the environment. And this is what's very heavy on the right shoulder, is the fact of trying to prove something, or to get out there, to have I would say too much ego, and too much to put yourself out there and forget what's the reason for you to be there. And often the key of that is the love of the sport and the love of the perfect run. And I try to put that correctly in words in English. And as you guys know, it's not my native language, so I
No,
try
you're
to
doing
put my best
incredible. It's incredible.
to put it well, because that's very emotional topic. But I would say the distance you have to create between the appearance of your action versus the deep inside of yourself of the reason you are doing it is a massive step. And the way to unload the pressure is to realize why you really want to do it. Why do you really want to put yourself on the top of the box? And for me, the happiness of my friends, the love of my environment, the message of commitment and of my value I could drive, the excellence of the preparation were all the good values that I would feel in myself, not being a real pressure, but just the optimum of what I could do in my run. If you load yourself with the eyes of the others, of what people would say or what people would think, etc., this comes down the hills with you. Every single pressure, every single movement, every single thought. And this is the massive distance that you have to find with things. And all that has to come with the right timing of your preparation all the way until the start gate. And what I say to my athletes, and I'm not shy to say it, is that when you are at the start gate, the race is over. Everyone thinks that the race is actually between the start and the finish. My philosophy is that the race is from the beginning of your prep to the start gate. What's happening between the start gate and the finish is just the reward of what you've done before. And the last 20 minutes up to the last 20 seconds before your start are crucial, because that's where you would put that famous puzzle that I was talking about together. It's a very thin line where you put things together. And you were talking about the story about Steve. How I have been my best friend for that race in 2004 in Léger. But no one talks about 2009 in Canberra. In Camberra, I was the best. In Canberra, I had the best bike, the best prep in 2009, and I should have been the one on the top of the podium.
And the best skin suit at the top half.
Yeah, exactly. With the arms.
Yeah. No.
And
respect, arms. It was in the rules. We must talk about that. Okay.
No knee pads, single crown fork. And I came into the race. I really focused my mind to avoid any discussion with everyone. The only goal was out there was to win that race. And you know what? When I came into the start gate, there is one thing that fucked up my mind. Only one thing, and that's the reason I didn't win.
The what? Sorry, the what you win?
The only reason I didn't win is that when I came into the start, and when I show up into the start, I knew that Steve could win on that weekend. No one would expected him, but I knew that Steve would win on that weekend. And I did the perfect run. I've been faster with the single crown on the first sector. I've been faster than everyone with the small bike, and I still have the bike in my house. And I came in that second sector fully committed, and I lost focus thinking about the result in the last corner. In the last corner before the long traverse in Canberra, I bucked the tire, I lost my speed, and I think I finished fourth at 0.8 behind Steve. And Mikana was third, Greg was second, and Steve was getting the unique world champion title that he was definitely deserving after the beautiful career he had done.
So did you think of Steve Pete in the start hut in, say, the last minute? Is that what you were saying? It popped into your mind.
Exactly.
You were like, no one's spoken about Petey. That came into your mind that late. So do you think...
This came in my mind the last 5 minutes of the start.
Fascinating. I wonder, and it's... Yeah. Do you think that is almost the reason for the mistake, like the universe, like you thought about it, and without the correct mental strategy to get it out of your mind, it's almost like you attracted that mistake. You were like, oh yeah, he could win, or maybe like subconsciously wanted him to win. You like maybe it was like it's fitting for him to win this one.
I definitely believe there is a reason to everything. And
Yeah.
that sometimes the planets align in one way and sometimes the planets align in the other. And I don't want in all the discussion we have to feel too high up there. But I deeply believe that our brain and our mental has a massive things to do with everything that happened to us in our life.
I mean, I
And that's
agree.
why
I certainly agree.
I work so hard every morning the way I mentioned it earlier. And I know that on that day in Canberra, I have been my worst enemy instead of being my best friend as I was in leisure.
But it's so fascinating. It's just like the world works in mysterious ways, and people might think we're a bit woohoo, but I don't think we can explain everything, and I don't think it would be fair to it would be egotistical to say we could explain everything. Is another way to
Yes,
put it.
no, and that's what we're trying to do all the time. If you look, science is trying to align everything and put numbers in everything,
And control
that's what we're
things.
doing. Yeah, that's
And
what we're
try
doing in
control
racing
things.
now. Because if you look now, I'm trying to put numbers in everything we're doing on the bikes with the athletes, etc., to try to guide them the best I can. But at the end of the day, it's not numbers. It's heartbeat and the mindset.
It's a
And
human.
frame things the best way you can with technology, with data on the bikes, with data on the dyno, with the bench machines, etc. At the end of the day, the rider is on the bike. And the rider needs to put the input out there. And that's the beauty of our sport. And that's definitely something that is very unique. I mean, if we go back to this whole atmosphere that you mentioned, that you don't question yourself why in the World Cup and World Champ in Léger, every time you have a French winning. Every time.
It's crazy true. Yeah.
Is the crowd actually taking the athlete and carrying him down the hill? How every time you have a French guy in Léger that pop himself out there, get the emotion out there, and pull out the run to get the victory. Loic, Loris, Benoit, Thibaut. And I feel that Léger put a stone in that wall in 2004. And then you had Greg in Peter Marisburg that put another rock out there. And it seems like people, every time they are riding on local, they're finding the crowd carrying them down the hill because there is clearly a lot more mental education into the athletes. And you can tell that the athletes are controlling more and more this mind game.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never thought about how many French winners we've had there, and using that energy correctly. But also the French preparation for Worlds is just, what is it? Everyone asks. Something in the water, back with Nico. What do they drink in the water back there with Nico? And with some people new to the sport don't even understand how eerie it was that he won seven out of 8 elite titles and the 3 as a junior, because I think he has 10 titles. And the only one
Correct.
he lost,
Yeah.
the only one he lost to not have the 8 in a row was in Spain, and he got a front flat or something, right? That was my
100%.
first
Yeah.
Worlds there. So just think about that. To one thing to prepare and get the bike right, but just for everything to align, 7 out of the 8 times to win Worlds. And it wasn't like he was winning every World Cup by 8 seconds so that it was an easy win. So
No, you're
back
correct.
then,
You're correct. He was the racing approach that was one of the key one. It was not just on skills. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the discussion, and Nico is a bit the same profile as I am. It's like it's not the skills, it's the work, the preparation, and the thinking that gets you out there. And the world champ is a unique one on our radar because it makes way more sense to us in the approach being world champ than a World Cup overall winner. World Cup is a step into a career where world champ is an achievement. And I do believe that even nowadays, you have an international recognition out of the sport for being world champ, which
Yeah.
you don't have, which you don't have to be a World Cup winner. So being world champion is something very unique that brings you completely out of your own sport. And that's the only way you can tell that you are the number one in the world. Because World Cup winner or overall winner is something that is very hard or harder to draw outside. And I feel that at least in my personal guts, it's something that is very, very different.
Yeah, but don't you think if they called the World Cup overall the World Championship, like they do in F1 or other sports, then it would carry that stigma, right? But because our sport has always designed it around World Champ stripes and a World Cup overall, that's where the disconnect comes. Because to me, they're equally as hard to win. You know, some would say World Champs is harder because you have to peak on one day, once a year. The course might not suit me. But part of me thinks if you can overcome some of that, there's less people that believe they can win World Champs. And then World Cup, you got to be consistent over a whole season, which even you, who's a legend of the sport, said you struggled with that. Different mindset. So I'm not saying which
100%.
one. I'm not. To me, they're equally as hard to win. I don't. It's so tough for me to weight it. But for sure, recognition. If you tell me to pick one, I pick the World Champs. It's going to help my career more, and it is more recognizable.
But that's where you touch the point, is that this is very cultural, and the way it has been installed by UCI, because world championship in cycling always been on one race in every discipline. But if you look at every other sport, the world championship is actually few events, where the World Cup is a one event thing. And I can tell you that I probably would have won a World Cup overall if it was called the World Championship.
Yeah,
Because
I would bet that as well.
This would have been my mindset and my main goal, and the way I would have driven myself to get to. And I completely agree with you that there is that difference that always existed in our sport, and that is very cultural. And it's a good question. It might change in the future, which I doubt. But it's a very good point. And the mindset and the quality of the athletes is very different as well. So you can tell that. But you were telling about the French on the world champs, but you can take Greg, who has been super consistent on world championship as well. You can take Sam, that has been super consistent as well. Steve is one that definitely struggled, but you can tell that it's not only the French. You have few exceptions that have been out there building the world championship, and that's true that the experience and that has been built through the French Federation and the French community on the approach of World Championship is a common pressure that has been drained through generation, and that makes, I guess, the French successful on those events.
Yeah, definitely. So defending that title, what did that re-energize you? Because some people, So some people, when they reach these crazy goals, it's very tough for them to be motivated to carry on. You know, some people can win one World Cup or they can win one World Champs, then go home and be like, okay, all that work, a life of work, my life is the same. The ego, be like, okay, what now? So did that?
You touching a good point.
Yeah, like I'm so fascinated because I see it in other sports, like the guy that wins one big competition but never quite comes back to that level. And some of them just admit it and say, well, I thought it would be more than it was, and it wasn't, and life goes on. And some people struggle with the pressure of re-energizing and getting to that level again.
I have a good question for you. When do you think was the worst day of my life career?
The worst day?
The worst day.
It's clearly
out of my injury, failures, injury, failure, disqualification at World Cups
yes.
for not taking the start, or the World Champ for not taking the start as well, 2002 in qualies. When do you think is the very worst day of my race career?
Shit, but it's a trick question. Maybe winning the second World Champs in downhill, knowing that maybe no, actually not, because you came back pretty hungry for the others. It's a trick question. I don't even have a guess.
I'm gonna give you the answer.
Give me a hint.
It's the next morning after Leger World Champ.
Oh shit. Okay. It was the worst time.
After winning.
Explain.
I wake up in my room. I got that World Champ jersey hanging onto the bedroom and asking Naomi, what's next?
Yes. That you
And
see
set up a goal.
that. Yeah.
Set up a goal, and you imagine that you are in a tunnel with a bright light. Okay, and this tunnel is giving you that direction. For Ligier, he went so far that, as a quick story, I wrote a letter to my family 8 months before the event, apologizing for my less of focus in my family commitments, because I was going to be gone for 8 months, just going on that direction. And suddenly you are in that tunnel and you see the end of the tunnel, you reach the end of the tunnel. And the moment you get out of it, it's an empty space.
Mm.
This is the feeling of the next morning after reaching your goals, when you really, really, really want them. Because you're like, okay, what's next? And you know, the beauty, if I can say, of my situation at that time was that so many people, as you said earlier, say that Steve crashed and that's why I won. That straight away the next morning, after having this feeling, I said, well, I'm going to win fair and square the year after. My only goal from now on is to win fair and square the year after, which I did. But then the next morning, I wake up again in 2005 and I say, okay, I did it. Now what? What do I do now?
So that was your second worst day of your career.
The second, like, so you end up and you're like, okay, and you know, I'm going to take another example, and I don't want to every time throw it too far away into life, but why do you think there is so many drugs and alcohol when people become rich and when people get power?
Well, they're bored. They have no path. There's no fulfillment. It's the same as ending a career. You're like, I even struggle with it. I'm like, okay, what do I focus on? I know previously I would wake up, I would train for this goal, to be a better athlete, to perform, to keep my contract, whatever it may be at the time. Yeah, I hear you. It's no surprise sportsmen and people get into shit. They want to distract themselves from the void. It's a void.
We completely underestimate the mental aspect of an end of an athlete career.
100%.
It's something when you reach your goal that you cannot realize when you reach the summit, and you know that from that moment it's only downhill. There's no more high. You reach the top. It's finished. You cannot go anywhere else. All you can see is lower. And you have to rebuild your priority, rebuild your understanding of life, and reprioritize the essentials of life, and reset yourself. And this is something that is super important. And I would say that when we say that sport is the best school for life, is because you learn about yourself in all those phases, from the beginning of the career, understanding yourself, during your career, understanding the other, and afterwards understanding again about life. And all those steps are, I would say, a real gift that allows you to understand more and more about who you want to be and where you want to go. And racing is absolutely exceptional for those reasons. And that's why I have so much respect for people that are in capacity to do long careers.
Yes, but are they not too scared of the void? Because it's almost the easy option is to stick with a career, because to step back is there's a death of the ego. There's death of your identity, you know? If everything is bike riding and stuff. How was it for you? So that was one of my earlier questions, right? Because this is half the reason for the podcast almost. I like to reconnect with people that have gone through, say, similar things as me. How do you cope with it? How's it been? It's looked good mentally, but how has it? Let's expose the struggle, you know, because everyone thinks, well, they don't think much of it. It's very difficult. And we've seen some athletes go in depression, turn to drugs and alcohol. So how was it for you? And then we maybe come back to Livigno, because you've got some interesting bike setup stories and race. I love the race strategy as well.
For sure, it's. I mean, first of all, I mean the global mental approach that you have when you stop is something that you have to decide. Once you are in your mindset, I don't want to judge people the way they drag along their career. I mean, it's all respect of everyone. We are all different, right? But for me, as I said earlier, I didn't want life to bring me to the end of my career, and I didn't have any interest of pushing my career along. Just it's never been a work for me. It's been a goal. And once my goal was achieved, I really felt like I needed to go somewhere else. And if you look, once I achieved my world champ title, I started to develop my own bikes to win with my own bikes, with Mondraker, and with my own team. And that's the moment after Livigno that I decided that I wanted to share with brand and with athletes and start to pass on my knowledge. And I knew that after the Mondraker project and the Mondraker team project, I was going to stop. This was clear to my mind. I would not see myself dragging along just for podiums and podiums and just putting myself on the top of a podium to just say I'm the best. Even if nowadays I'm still sick with the clock. I learned so much about the clock that I almost know how long I need to shower, how long I need to breakfast, and how long I need to exactly drive to the office. And every time I am on the bike with the athletes, I have to take the watch and look at the time against myself on every run to see why. And I can tell you within each second of a minute how far I am between my athletes and behind my athletes when I'm riding with them. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of the clock. It's a sickness I have, but I'm still trying to solve. And this is something that I'm trying to progress with. But I stopped racing more than 10 years ago, and my sickness is still not solved. What I'm trying to say is that the process of stop to being a rider or an athlete. I didn't want the physical to be the reason or the injury to be a reason. I would not accept that. No chance. I didn't want to be my technical capacities and skills to reach the level there. I wanted this to be my own decision. And this was really important to me and the only way to make sense to what was next.
Interesting. Because when I stepped away, I think the industry gave me a little bit of a hint. But my speed, if I could have got on a team, and I've mentioned before, but I could have traveled home a bit more. I was really energized to try a year or two like that. But with the lack of factory sponsorship opportunity, and to me, I thought, okay, so if I end at 32 or I end at 34 or 36 in 10 years or now when we speak, do you care when I finished? No, no one should care. They don't care. So I used a bit of the universe giving me a little bit of a lesson, like, okay, which helped me with the decision. It was maybe going to be harder than me to just walk away, So it's an interesting time. That's why thanks for sharing that.
In your case, you made a beauty out of that. Because if you look as a racer, you have done a great career. But now, being so much involved, being on the other side to share with your knowledge, with all the viewers, the activity you have nowadays, you make the proximity with high level sports, with the viewers, that is a great connection and message that probably is something that is a great path. Many people would just draw back and take the end of the career as an end, and you transform that as a message and as an opportunity to communicate with people. And I'm sure that you don't do that because it's a job. Obviously, I hope it is now for you, but you do it because you have a passion for it. And nowadays it's true for every kid, and you have kids, and I have as well. It's like having the chance to wake up every morning to do something that you actually love is making your actually work performance way higher.
Yes.
If one day you believe that being a pro athlete is a work, that's the day you have to stop. And I think we both agree on that. And the universe has told you something, and out of that you made something great to communicate with the people the way you do. And I think we we all trying to find an master career when we are pro athletes and find a different way to exist than just going against the clock. And this goes through a certain process where you have to reconnect with simple life, with essential and mandatory to reset your self goals.
Yeah, it's been super interesting, and people say, "Oh, you've done so well," and I appreciate the vote of confidence. But it has been a big challenge, right, to find that goal. For me, I struggle with that. Okay, so the podcast. Do I want to be the number one podcast? I don't really know. To me, that's like an ego thing. But having this chat, so fun. Or connecting with Nathan Rennie. I wouldn't have a 2-hour conversation with someone like Rennie. And I got to do that. So yeah, I'm very lucky that is fun. And then the work comes around that, because you have to book the guests, you have to edit it, you have to do X, Y, Z. Same as you now.
Mm.
You must love being at the races, but there's so much work to get the bike ready for Troy to go down the hill, right? But because you love helping and going like that, the work just is a byproduct. So yeah,
Yeah, no, and 100%. You're totally correct. Is that it's the same when you are a pro racer. I love to ride downhill, but I hate to go on my road bike. Nowadays, different. I like it, but back in the day, I was
me too. It's
hating.
quite therapeutic.
Yeah, I was like, "Fuck, it's boring. It's terrible. I don't want to do it." But there is the fun part, but there is the hard work behind. And I would say making sense to what you do is the key, and setting yourself goals and striving for your goals without any hesitation. Breaking boundaries is definitely what we should keep on doing, even out of racing. At least it's my philosophy, and that's what I'm trying to do.
No, I've learned that from you. Is almost like you don't let yourself any excuses. Whether you won the world champs or not, you put in so much effort with the bike, preparation, the visualization, so that there were races you prepared the same amount but didn't win. And I look back on my career with that. Maybe I could have optimized a little bit more, be honest. But maybe I solved a little bit for my mood or being away from home so long. I had to maybe release some of the tension a bit more and didn't optimize for performance all the time. But if I got 9.5 out of 10, like I sit back very comfortable with my career or very proud of it, right? But yeah, that new philosophy of after racing is super tough, and that's why I love chatting to you guys. You and some athletes have struggled with it, but for me, from what I can see, you've just like taken the bull by the horns with this new goal of developing bikes and helping these athletes.
That's what I told you earlier. Is I always try to have a step ahead in life. I always have in the back of my mind the next project. So I know that when I reach the goal, or if for any reason I stop something, I'm always ready to go again. So it feels like a bit of like a non-stop, bringing. But that's who I want to be. And it doesn't mean that every person needs to be that way. I want to be this person that has goals and has motivation and permanent motivation for my own goals. And this is a very personal choice. Some people are maybe wishing to have a more quiet life and more easygoing, but the culture I received and the education I received and who I am in my DNA is actually bringing me in that direction. And that's why, yes, 100%, I take the bull by the horn. And I knew that when I was going to stop my racing career, it was to build and develop products and also develop team and athletes. The only thing that was not planned, if I'm fully honest, is the enduro part that was in the middle, that came up with the shapeshifter technology and the creation of the sport. This was not part of it, of my
Really, that's
idea at
funny.
all. Yeah, but it just came up and in the middle of all that. But I would say the last 20 years of my life were already for me predetermined. And that's where
Wow.
I'm saying is like, I don't give up, and I just try to fight for it every day the way I think it's right to do so.
No, I love that. I think it'd be a disservice of me not to unpack some of these other downhill stories. So, 2005, you decided you have to defend this title. Enough people talking shit about Steve Pete crashing in the last turn. You're going to defend this title. But at that time, there's someone that did his own way of changing the sport as much as you did, as much as Nico did, as much as PD Greg. Sam Hill, you've spoken that he pushed you to new levels. He inspired you to try flat pedals. He inspired you to understand grip on the bike. Like, what was it like taking lessons in theory from a youngster like that?
This was the only moment of my race career where I was looking at him riding and I was not being able to understand. I was like, how can he get so much grip? How can he use so little energy on his race run? How can he be so consistent on the way he was riding? Like for me, for Steve, I would say Nico was a Martian. And Nico was the one that was coming from another planet. And for me, in my race career, Sam was this one. Sam was the one that I had, that I was the most inspired from. Flat pedals, the way he was keeping the grip in the corner, the way he was cornering was very, very unique. And yeah, he is the one that pushed my boundary and my thinking. And after his bronze medal in Léger, I know that in Livigno he was going to be right up there. And the only way for me to compete was to have two aspects. I know that mentally he was as good as me, and I knew that technically he was on the top of the game on his bike. The only way for me to perform was to be able to put a heavier pace vehicle and to find a mechanical advantage. And those two parameters were the parameters that I really, really pushed heavily because I knew the run was really long and very tensed. And I knew that the stability of the chassis, because we had a very high average speed at the time on that run, was going to be a key factor. And that's where I came up with the first 720 or 740 millimeter wide bar, 59.5 degree at angle, minus 20 BB.
Say that again. Say that again. No one uses that now. 59.
59.5.
Really?
And minus 20 millimeter BB height compared to the wheel axle.
What is standard now? Sorry, what is standard now? I don't even look at geometries much anymore.
Yeah, you minus 5, minus 7 around, and you have bigger wheels.
Yeah, so then the minus 20 on 26 is huge.
The BB was like extremely low, and I came to the discussion with Paul. I said, well, we have a problem here. Okay, we got the stability, but because the bike is so open and we charge so much, I keep bottoming out the suspension. And let's be honest, the brake doesn't keep up. So Paul was trying to put some thinking in there, and we designed some levers for those Haynes brake at the time that was extended, like longer levers. So we brought the levers in, we put the bar wider, we inverted the rocker of the Kuna bike to be able to more progressivity at the end of travel, making some extension ports. And then I called Jack, Loic's mechanic, who was my mechanic a few years before. And I said, Jack, you need to prepare my suspension. I want rock hard high speed. It's very simple. We open it to have some grip, but the high speed, I want something completely locked. Because the track was not so chattery, was lot of G out, and it was very, very smooth, big landing, but then like you need a lot of speed in the straight line, like very keeping a lot of speed. And I remember I had a Suzuki 888 at the time, and every single impact, the fork was locking. It was like the bike was just going like this. We pushed the boundary of this bike, and I said, now we have to understand. So straight after Léger, in November 2004, I put flat pedal on my bike. Never rode flat pedals on my bikes, and I did 6 months of flat pedals, just trying to understand how sound could get so much grip. And that's the very, very first time that I completely draw the cleat position under the shoes and put my cleats back to try to create less leverage on my calf and more load from my hamstrings and quads to be able to get like better pressure and better feeling in the corners to be closer to Sam's skills. And if you look nowadays, all the new top shoes, if you measure from the heel to the center of the cranks, they have been able to 18 compared to what the cross country shoes we were using back in the days. And it was the very first time I moved the cleats, I widened the bar, I really opened the head angle, dropped the BD, and make something very, very aggressive to be able to compete against some that had unique skills at the time. And the funny story you can talk to Sam. I don't know if you. I don't think you did a podcast yet. If you did, you can ask him the question. I remember sitting next to him into the lift line, and we were looking at each other. And he looked at me, looked at my bike, looked at his, and he said, "Fab, I feel like I am on a BMX bike next to you." Because my bike was so long, so open and low that everything was very compact to him, and it was way faster. But my racing approach, my mechanical choice paid off. And again, I think between us, it was like more than a 3-minute run. It was less than a second between the two of us.
That's so fascinating. And this bike, did you race other World Cups on that aggressive setup? I would assume not. The World Cups leading up to it, you were on your normal one, and then you would prep on this specific bike. That doesn't seem to be happening now. Not at that aggressive level. Like, yes, I think there's different rockers and swing arms, and like, why are we not doing that now? Like building once-off bikes for certain tracks. I mean, maybe you are, but
we slowly getting there.
You think we'll get back
3
there?
Years?
Yeah.
Since 2 or 3 years, you maybe don't see it, obviously, but the bike the riders are using are fairly different every races. And I think it will be even more. It will be even more in the next seasons. You will see. And for me, the track was so unique. I used the bike we prepare it, we tested it, prepare it, and then for the last 3 weeks before the race, I use only this bike to get used to it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And yeah, it was very, very unique. And that was one of the best pieces that we did with Paul, and the win was a big pride for us, for sure. It was a big one, especially after Léger and the discussion we had. It was a big one.
Yeah, I guess things in life go full circle, right? Some of these visualization things coming back, and it's just so interesting that we should be doing once-off bikes. And you've spoken a bit more. It's always a compromise, right, with testing and engineering. So you could maybe speak to the listener. Like if you want a Val de Sol big hit bike, you're going to give up some speed on the flats and pumping and pedaling, right? But if it's a world champs, yeah, I feel like we should have a full different bike. Like I understand, like you say, there's adaptions and you can have different shim stacks and maybe a different rocker. But I mean, you had a completely different bike that was probably not rideable on any other track. I mean, that's ahead of its time.
Not rideable, but not optimized for it. That's for sure. And I can tell you that Loris this year prepared his bike, his mindset only for this run. This was the game. And I know
Andorra.
Loic to Andorra. And I know Loic had an unfortunate crash, but Loic did the same.
That makes sense.
That's for sure. And I would say mentality are really changing right now. The time the athlete spends on the racetrack now in preparation or ahead of the event are more and more. Look how many people are going ahead to prepare the bike for a certain track, for certain section of the track, because let's not forget, nowadays the bikes are different in between sections now. Not only from one race to the other, but you change it in between.
Yeah, with the suspension settings you can change. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
With the electronic, with everything. And in the future, we will see that a lot more. So the versatility of the product will get more and more involved on a race run, on the different races, and we will see I would say a very large opening. What the sport is suffering right now is incoming to the team itself. Because let's be honest, we all developing and pushing boundaries technological wise, but everything is supported by the industry. And without going on another topic, the industry only wants to develop things that goes after in OEM and in the market. Developing things purely dedicated to racing is only just now happening.
Mm.
And what we need is the sport to become visibly on TV a lot wider than what it is, to be able to have incomes out of the industry and then really rise the game of technology. It's what's happening on F1. If you look in F1, maybe the motors are developed by the car manufacturer, but all the rest is all developed by the teams. And all the incomes the team gets are from out of the sports sponsors. And I really hope that the new dynamic that we have now with Warner Bros. And the new structure, we're going to manage to get this audience and slowly get out of the sports sponsor to be able to finance development of technology that will be only dedicated for racing and rise the sport and the technology on the sport to the level it must be.
So would you say there's a budget money constraint, and that's what's keeping technology where it is at the moment? That's what I'm hearing. Then it makes perfect sense, because you can't say, Canyon, give me another $2 million to make this bike even more optimized to win a race, but you won't be able to use that technology in any other bike, but it'll win the downhill race as a marketing ploy, and then it's a tough sell for them, right?
I would say we have a limit to it right now.
Yeah.
And that the only way to break that limit is to have income that is coming out of the sports. We're slowly getting into product that is not going to be sold slowly, but we need to go and could go way beyond that with nowadays technological environment out of the sport. We could have bikes that could go even further into details and far in terms of performance.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, my one fear is breaking the sport, trying to get to that critical mass of getting the outside industry sport. Like, what are your thoughts on limiting the field in the finals and limiting the teams and these new rule changes? I understand the goal is for Warner Brothers to do well, to expose it to new audience, obviously to make a great broadcast, which hopefully brings them money, and hopefully there's a knock-on effect. It just seems like a disconnect, as you've said, is the industry is holding it all together right now with a pretty weak string, if you ask me.
Your fear is 100% correct. There is a risk. There is a big risk, but there is the same risk as when you take the start of a downhill run. At some point, if we want to go further, we have to shape the pot to be able to go to a different level. And we all know that TV is the success and the growth of our sport, because we are already maxed out to what we demand to the industry. For sure, bike sales are amazing, but if tomorrow there is no downhill on TV, would you think bike brand invest into downhill? Probably not. So there is a good chance. There is a good chance that bringing to a larger audience that are not bikers will give us the opportunity to have different income and grow the sport. The fear that you're having that is completely legitimate is that growth might create a break with the community. And the community is where you and me are coming from. The core of the sport, where you have the beginners into local races that go through regional, local, nationals, and then international races. And this is definitely pointing on the process. And I hear you. And that's a tough job for Warner to be able to keep that thing together. That is the current base of our pyramid and the way our sport works. And there is a risk, and you can see Andrew really suffering from that. Let's be honest, Andrew is gone from the field for next year. I don't even talk about e-bike. Everything is gone from the landscape. But the downhill side and the cross-country side are the big highlight of these big investors. And I see that being a great opportunity to bring the sport to the next level. And yes, it is a risk. And I don't know if what they're doing right now is what's going to bring us there. I'm not here to judge that. But the direction that it's pointing is, for me, a fantastic opportunity for the sport.
That's well put, and it maybe changes my wording and mindset. Like, I am fearful, right? So I'm trying to be open-minded, trying to see from their side. And obviously I have a bias. I've always said, of course, I'm going to have some sort of rider bias, team, community bias for sure. and I'm not in those meetings, so that I have these fears. And I think what you've said is good, is like, okay, but it's a risk. Any change causes risk. To stay the same is a risk as well. So,
And honestly, I don't believe things. S- Everything has a beginning and everything has a end. We born, we die, we start a career, we finish a career, we start a run, we finish a run. If you look everything in life as a beginning and as a end, we had a fantastic story back in the day with Grandig and Eurosport. After that, we had a fantastic story with Freecaster. You remember back in the day, Freecaster that was doing the thing. Then Red Bull took over. Amazing story with Red Bull Media House that works really well. But we were maxed out. We needed the next phase for that. And the way to grow was to go to a wider audience with a bigger player. And I think the opportunity with Warner is not to miss. Uh, Now the structure that they put in place is the question mark to see if it's going to be successful or not.
Yeah, fair enough. When was the height of your career, like salary wise? Not that that's your goal, like, but maybe when was the height of your career, like brand wise? Like you said, you had all these
I would
phases.
say I would say very early 90s was interesting, but it was not me. Then in the year 2000, when I signed with GT, I did 2 years in the US, with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Brian Lopes, Eric Carter. So we did, those were good moments of the career, super interesting. Then there was really a down. And then he drove back in 2010 into a really good level when Freecaster came in and the beginning of internet and the communication, social media, etc. was really interesting. And then I think he only grew until then. Because don't forget that in the middle of that, after the year 2000, when Eurosport stopped, we had the wave of freeride. And one of the reasons I signed with Kona back in the days is because they had that movie Freeride Entertainment that you probably know.
Yeah, yeah.
That the New World Disorder. And the New World Disorder, I signed with Kona to bring them into World Cup in the exchange of them putting myself into the movie to be able to create a stronger image of myself in North America and have
Yeah,
a
I
segment in
heard
the
that.
movie.
Yeah, I heard that, and I was that was super interesting to me. Coming from someone that doesn't give a shit, and that'll take the peak off if it's faster, will wear skin suit on the top within rules. Like I say it with respect. At the time, I was like, yeah, I guess I'm too self conscious to like do that. Like it's actually so silly. But then you had the self awareness to say, okay, I want to build my brand, and I see opportunity to get put in that movie, which was huge back then.
Yeah. When I won my first races, my first World Cups was in Mont. Then I won in Grass Mountain in Canada. And I realized that in North America, my image was not there. I was known in the UK, I was known in Spain, in Italy, in Europe, globally, but I was not very well known in North America. And some of the team and the biggest sponsor was from up there. And when Eurosport completely stopped to communicate with downhill, freeride was getting big, was getting huge. And I was like, well, the North American market and all the big brands were going out there. And when I had the opportunity with Kona, I said, well, I should go in that. And I will prove that I'm not simply the guy that put a skin suit and race, and I have the capacity to throw shit down the hill
Yeah.
and do some big gaps and do high speed quality segment with good cinematography. And I had a fantastic opportunity to do so with Derek Rensland and Alex, that was his camera guys there, and we had great adventure. It was super good. I met people that was completely away of my habits. Robbie Borden and John Cowan at the time, and all those guys were like freeriders, no clue of what the training was. Didn't know how to corner one corner fast, but they would backflip stuff and throw big jump down the hill, just heavy landing, which was completely different type of riding than myself. And it was a fantastic opportunity and a great time of my life to go and hang out with those guys and push boundaries of what I was capable to do at the time.
Yeah, I actually, looking back, I can see that it did do your brand good. Like I remember now looking at the kit, and you had good baggies, and it wasn't always a skin suit. Like, I like to give you a bit of shit about the skin suit, right? Like, I wore one as well. But where it may have backfired, and you correct me if you even remember this, Rennie thinks that it helped to Wes when he won the World Cup there. I feel like you were in the start gate ahead of him, and I think you took your peak off, but last minute. And I think that pissed him off enough that he found that extra gear to win that race. Do you remember any of that? Because I feel like he told me that story, but it would be nice to hear it if it is accurate and it's true from your side.
Yeah, I don't remember if I took it off on the last minute, because that's not really my style. I was more, I would say, showing to the guys that I was pushing boundaries, and maybe sometimes a bit attacking them on the topic more than trying to hide it.
Yeah.
One thing is sure, and I was pretty pissed that off. And if I'm correct, he was in Alpe d'Huez, and that's what joins maybe Nathan's story, is that Steve, that was the big leader of the Visor story, and you probably don't remember that story, but the UCI didn't want to make a rule about it. They were working on a rule on the skin suit and not on the visor. And I made very clear to everyone, I say, guys, if we have a clear rule that is controllable, we will apply it. If the rule is bullshit, I don't accept it. I don't agree with it. Like, for example, when they start to put the skin suit story, the reason I put in 2009 the sleeve in skin suit and the baggy jersey is that, if you remember, the rule was crap. He was saying in the rule that you could fit only 3 fingers under the sleeve. So you would have to be able to fit 3 of your fingers under the sleeve to be concerned as baggy. But he didn't mention any elastical material at the time or anything. That's what I told them. The rule, a good rule, is a rule you can respect and be respected.
It's clear. Yeah,
if it's not
clear,
it's not clear enough, it doesn't work. And in Alpe d'Huez, and that you will have to ask Steve, Steve showed up with the TLD, I think the 2, and instead of the downhill visor, he had the cross-country visor.
Oh, yeah, it was smaller, yes.
The smaller one, and that pissed me off. And that's where I completely took off the visor. If I'm correct, it's 2003. I completely took off the visor. I say, guys, if the rule is not clear and the agreement is not clear, I don't put the visor on. And that's true that I did second behind Nathan, that did a great run on that race. And that whole story of visor and non-visor was something that was playing around with some opinion leaders, and Steve and Greg were the opinion leaders at the time. And clearly, I was the fighter against the rule not being clear enough to say how new it should be and how wide it should be.
Yeah, so it's actually Steve Pete's fault that you did that, then helped Rennie. So it's actually Petey's fault that Rennie went on to win the race, and he won the title that year. I think 03 is the year Rennie won the title on that.
Rennie won. Yeah, I won a captain overall at the end. Yeah.
That pretty thrown together iron horse with geometry modified. Yeah, I was hanging out with those. So those guys were my education to the international race circuit and the Orbers.
I remember.
In 2003. Yeah. So it's nice getting those stories. So I was forced to be on their side, right? Because they were like my mentors.
But what's great is that what we learned from that is that the mistake that has been done in that process is that riders were trying to make the rule. There is a federation right there, and look, I make an explosion.
Yeah, I see that. I don't know hopefully, yeah, I don't know. It's the technology.
I think that the lesson out of that, and I think everyone will agree with that, is that the riders cannot be the one making the rules. You can apply comments and discuss, etc. But you need an entity that clearly states the rules for the sport to be fair and square. And any rule needs to be very well controlled and controllable. If the rule is made and badly written and not controllable, then it's not a good rule. And that's what I was the big fighter for when it was the moment of skin suit, when it was the moment of the visor, etc. Now, you look back nowadays, every time you have a very fast race, everyone is wearing super tight clothing, and everyone is making holes in the visors to be able to fit in, even holes in the number plates for aero now. So I would say my mentality was ahead of the time. And I completely understand what Greg and Steve and Nathan were trying to do to kind of protect also the identity of the sport. And I don't think anyone was wrong. I just think that based on where we were coming from, we had different priorities and understanding of where things should go. And 100%, he was a fight between all those guys. But as you said at the beginning, I built myself to don't really give a fox. I was still pushing
Yeah.
boundaries.
No, I've seen that from afar, and I can understand it even more. And I think having a longer chat, everyone can understand it now, and it was great.
For sure.
And it's funny how it's
That's part of
coming
the
full
of
circle.
history.
Eh?
It's part of the history of it's really part of the history of the sport, and it's part of the personality and the character of each people in the sport. And I think it's a great global rules where everyone put his own rock that we have built until now. And that's what I said. I really hope that with the foundation that we have created, Warner is going to now build a solid building on the top of it that's going to make our sport in a great way.
So if you were racing now, do you think the ride? So you said that it doesn't help for the riders to make the rules, and I can understand that they probably won't get the terminology correct. It might not be clear. It might be biased. So we need a governing body. I agree. We need a broadcast partner. We need an event people. Now, what I'm seeing is some of these rules are getting written to benefit the broadcast, which is then the goal to grow the sport and bring more money in. Totally understand. I have my fears. You say it's a risk. If you were racing now, don't you think you would want more of a voice? Because it just does not seem listened to at all. It just doesn't seem that way. I could be wrong. It's just the riders communicating to me are saying, but we try, it doesn't work. I just want to have the conversations and understand what's going on. Do you think you would be sitting back, or you would be the antagonistic guy to say, hey, we at least want to be listened to. We at least want to have input because it's our livelihoods. That's all I fight for.
Yeah, for us as a team, it is something that we also make very clear to the athletes and to the promoters. We need voice from the industry, from the teams, and we need voice from the athletes. Those are the two components of the sport aligned with the promoter. So if the promoter doesn't listen the teams and doesn't listen the riders, it will collapse at some times. It's for sure that at some point it will fail. And the only reason to be listened by the promoters is to structure properly each of the entities. And right now, I believe that at the team level, it starts to get there. But at the athlete level, there is way too much ego again, and they are not structured enough. Because everyone wants to be the boss of the voice with a certain leadership. And you can tell that based on your ranking, your voice is stronger than the other.
That's
be
not
honest.
fair. Yeah, that's
Let's
not
be
right
honest.
either.
But it's not because you're the fastest on the bike that you are the one that know the most what needs to be done either. And luckily, we have great ambassadors in the sport. And I'm not saying in the case, because you take Loic, you take all our guys, they are really being constructive with each other. But I really believe that the rider committee needs to be structured in a more professional way with independent persons that are in capacity to summarize and create a structured voice to the promoter. All this supported by the team and supported by the industry. It is easy to say, but not as easy to do. And I really hope that we will manage to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been singing that story for a long time now. If I lived in Europe or went to more races, I might put my hand up. I think they need someone that's not currently racing, but with good communication skills, be able to summarize it. But I think, and I would hope, that the organization would insist on this also happening, because it can be a helpful tool done correctly. Easier said than done. But why would you not want everyone that has invested interest to, maybe have a say? And look, they have riders representative. They're getting info. I just sometimes hear there's a vote and the 90% is against something, and then it just goes through. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't affect me. I'm here at home, as you mentioned, just trying to spread the conversation, have an awesome chat with you. and people can learn so much. So yeah, I don't have a lot more to
Let's
say. I think you've
let,
summed it up well. I just wish it would happen sooner rather than later.
let's be honest. It doesn't come from an organization standpoint for one reason: is that everything came up super quickly, and at the moment they are more trying to keep up with their own strategy than
Yeah, fair
trying
enough.
to
Fair enough.
focus on the satellite side of the things, and that we can tell very frankly, and I think they are well aware of it. On the other side, if you go to a writers' meeting, and I saw some of those chats they have, etc., it's way too chaotic. It's way too chaotic, and everyone is trying to bring up his point of view, and it like things needs to be structured. And I think he has to come from an organization demand. But at some point, the writers supported by the team need to really structure that input, that writer input that is going to the promoter, or we're going to have a big lack of information and not pointing at the needs and the direction it must take for the sport itself and not only for the promotion aspect of things.
Yeah, well said. And I don't blame the riders as well. Like, imagine being at a race and trying to look at WhatsApp chats. And as you said, everyone has a bias and their own opinion. It should be done months in advance, for sure. I can see why there is a disconnect for now. And like I say, we don't know the pressures coming down on top of who is running Warner Brothers for mountain biking, right? Like you
Well,
say,
there is the
things are
politic.
happening a lot faster, and a lot of change was put in place. Yeah.
You can tell that there is a big political influence to Warner, where the organization crew is inside a huge machine
Mm.
that is there for business and creating views and creating content and creating money. No doubt, it's very clear. But on the other hand, we have to show ourselves, even if the transition will be on until we get the real funds. But we have to show ourselves with professionalism, education, and structure. If they feel that they are facing non-educated and non-professional human beings that are just capable to ride bikes, we're not going to succeed in our communication with them. So I really believe that coming with a very structural approach and a constructive discussion is the key to the success in that global dynamic, knowing that we have amazing athletes, we have great teams already in place with solid brands that have a great image, and a huge big player that is a great bridge for us to a new era of our sports.
Yeah, well said. I think you're engineer, you're solution orientated, right?
Well,
So
yeah,
you have a feedback, you have an observation, then you give some solutions or some direction we could potentially go. I think that's critical, isn't it, in life and riding and all these things.
yeah, it's something that we need to bring into place if we want the sport to succeed. It's the way I have been racing, and some people win races more on talent, and some people win races more on their head. I know that I always have and have had a very tactical approach, and it's still the case nowadays in my project. And I try to be the same when I interact with people. And I think we have great ambassadors of the sport out of the racers. The racers, we do have obviously great ambassadors, but also in the industry, in the teams, you have great faces
Mm.
with people that are capable to talk to brands, to federation, to Warner, etc. And I think that's all this puzzle again that needs to come together.
Wicked. So as we maybe wind down, do you have any regrets from the racing career? Any do-overs you so wish you could have had? I know you didn't mention the wind yet because you mentioned Fort William and you mentioned Livigno, but there's a wind story that ties both together as well, and almost that the universe works in mysterious ways. You and PD had an exchange, Leger, Canberra, but you and Sam had an
Yeah,
exchange, Livigno and Fort William. I mean,
yeah.
looking back at that, think about that. How
It's
fitting, how ironic, how serendipitous.
I believe, yeah, your own core is always linked to each other, and there is definitely something strong between Steve and me, and there is definitely something strong between Sam and myself as well. And even if we are not close friends to call each other every day, we definitely have a strong mutual respect for what we have shared and the competition we had together. And they both been part of my past at a very, very high level, without a doubt.
Yeah, because now I don't see the villain and the hero as much anymore. You know, with Loic and Loris being such good friends and competitors, Amaury, you know, so that like the French are like this community together, but then they've had they've been teammates with Sam Blinky, so like everyone's been sort of friends with the other side of the hemispheres a bit, you know.
Yeah.
So now it seems like where's the next rivalry? Because it was almost juicy back then when I was like, ooh, Barel and Sam at each other, and Barel's done this, and Sam's going to do that, and then it was Greg and you, and G and Greg, and Steve and you. But I don't see it as much anymore. I wish
Yeah,
I'd have more to
that's true,
chat about on the review podcast if it was so. But everyone's being too nice to each other, or not as gamesmanship.
yeah, I would say maybe they are not as raw as we used to be. Also, because you know that the rivalry is there, and I would say the way we were communicating back in the day was way different than now. Now, let's be honest, there is a level of politically correct that
Yeah,
is
true.
installed in our sport and in our society that is way different than back then. Back then, it was more, you would punch each other in the face and say, okay, let's go on the top of the hill and see what's faster. Now, they would say, no, let's go and have fun together, but they still be at the top, ready to push it. So I would say the politically correct has a big role to play in the middle of all that.
Just like people sprinkling their homes, it's also a great time to reset your body and routine. Whether you're heading into warmer days or still shaking off winter, feeling good starts from the inside. And for me, that starts with AG1. I've always cared about my health, whether it was during my racing days or now, juggling travel, work, riding, the little one, and everything in between. But even with the best intentions, I don't always get the nutrition I need. That's why I love AG1. It's so easy. One scoop, I mix it up in 60 seconds, and boom, I'm covering my bases with 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and more. No more cabinets full of random supplements. I hate that. Just one simple habit that actually sticks. With daylight savings kicking in for some, those brighter mornings are a great time to dial in your routine. Whether you're waking up to crisp spring air or full blown summer heat like I am in South Africa, AG1 helps me shake off the grogginess and get going. Plus, it actually tastes good, which makes it easy to stay consistent. This time of year, we're all getting outside more, riding, traveling, just being more active. AG1 makes it simple to support my body, whether I'm at home or on the move with the travel packs. Listen to this, it's been tested for over 500 herbicides and pesticides, made with no artificial junk, and it's NSF certified for sport, so I trust what's going into my body. Best of all, there's a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. Right now, you get a free bottle of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs at a $48 value for free when you go to drinkag1.com/moving the needle or click the link in the show notes. That's drinkag1.com/moving the needle to simplify your routine and feel your best this season. Start with AG1. You were saying how it was a little different back in the day with the rivalries, and you guys weren't scared to say, "Hey, we'll see each other in the bar over a beer or two. We'll duke it out, if you will, and we'll let the sort of racing do the talking." I think now the athletes are a little bit nicer to each other's face, but then they want to rip each other's head off on the racetrack. When you see someone like Amaury bouncing back with that comeback win in Val de Sol. There's some fighting talk when you lay down a run like that. So, yeah, that's a good way to put it, man. And this has been such a fascinating chat. I knew it would be, right? I knew some of the history. We've seen each other on the side of the track, but I'm so thankful, dude. Thanks for your time, for being so open and raw and honest. I've actually learned a hell of a lot to just understand your thinking. And I think we can go a long way in life, right? If we really just pause the ego and try and understand someone else's perspective, whether we agree or not,
I agree with you. I'm fully aligned on the fact that we just need to move along and get our experience together and enjoy the time. It was definitely great to share the passion, and I didn't see you a long times on the track, and we always had some good sharing, and I'm glad we had that good talk. It's a good one. Thank you, Lilo.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe as we close, what's the craziest thing you tried on a bike that looking back just was never going to work? And you're like, we tried it, but it never worked and it was probably never going to work. But you had to physically try it with the bike.
On You mean on the bike setting, maybe?
Yeah, on the bike setting.
I'm honest with you. There is a bunch of things we tried, and sometimes it went back and forth, but nothing that we really actually draw somehow a positive out of. Because everything you do is very rarely 100% correct, but there is always a percentage to draw out of it to learn something to go to the next step. So I don't think there is anything that I really tried where I'm like, fuck, that's the wrong direction. It's not the good one. Or at least that means that we put some good thinking ahead.
Yeah, fair enough. And even say the zero stack, where you guys grew the reach of the physical frame and then you sort of had the zero stem, like all those things just taught you something for the future, even though you now don't
Sure.
believe in that or you don't feel like it's the optimum setup, right?
Well, the problem is always the concept versus the marketing. Like marketing the zero stamp, when they brought to me that stamp at Mondraker back in the days, it was actually 11 millimeter. It cannot be zero or it feels backward. So the way to be
Yes.
above the axle was 11 millimeter. But the way it was looking, I'm honest with you, I put the bike in my garage and I was going on the front of it for a month. I'm like, is it really acceptable? And the question was no, it was not acceptable. But we still decided to launch it this way to properly stamp the marketing and the idea of it. And if you look now, everyone and every brand actually move on that trend.
Yeah. And what was the best bike that was the most, say, optimized for its time? Because you rode that iDrive, and I got one as a very youngster, and I thought that bike was a little bit ahead of its time compared to the other bikes that were out there. So that's just
You
an
mean
example I
out
feel.
of all bikes or out of
Yeah,
the bikes
like,
I rode?
yeah, well, I guess that's a twofold question. Compared to the other bikes out there, it seemed iDrive was a little bit ahead of its time in that era. Like in 2000 or whenever you rode it first, I was like, it just seemed a little bit better ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Is that true? And then maybe out of all your bikes, which was like, that was the most optimized and the most high performing one in that, you know?
Just to answer your question on the iDrive, I think it was one of the very first bike that was generating speed.
Mm,
It was actually tracking the ground and adding grip, but also generating speed. This is what was making it a real race bike. Before that, the Sun bike, the Radical Plus, was really good for all traction, but very, very poor dynamically wise. When the iDrive was actually using somehow the extension of the train, the chain growth, and still use the support of the suspension, and you could actually generate speed out of a corner and pedal out of a corner super dynamically. So I think this was the very first bike that was kind of having this attitude, and a lot of brands learned from it afterwards. Now, out of all the bikes, the very advanced one, I would say that yeah, when the D-Wheeling came in and the virtual pivot point started to appear, it was definitely something that been a bit of a game changer, and really kind of linked the two parameters of grip, absorption, and dynamism, and which was definitely the hardest combo back in the days to find. And we can see nowadays, like high pivot bike versus idler bike, etc., that we still on that research in the senior level, but that we still in that research of compromising the chassis.
that makes me remember, we've spoken full circle quite a lot in life and riding. You tested a high idler wheel on one of your bikes, right? Way before people thought about it. Yeah,
For sure.
to help
For
with the
sure.
pedal feedback. Yeah, you did. Hey,
2003.
And now they're
2003.
like, and then now there's factory teams like, oh, we're doing this high idler wheel. You're like, okay, we tried that 20 years ago. Eh? It's like fashion. Everything
That's
comes back in fashion.
exactly at the end. You always and everything comes back, and that's, I would say, that's the beauty of it, because every time something comes back, it comes back for a similar reason, but further in details, with deeper thoughts, and everything progresses. That's the way it is, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. And looking back, I said, oh, what's the craziest thing you tried or did? And you said on the bike, meaning you might have thought that you did something in your training that was silly, or preparation, or going out to the bar before a race. Like, was there anything there you're like, yeah, that wasn't great?
The most stupid things I've done, and I think I shouldn't have done, is when I jumped out of an helicopter in the volcano on the Reunion Island. This was back in the days in 2003 or four, and this was a big crash. And the stupid things is that I went and do it a second time for a photo, like the day after. After we understood better the turbulences of the alley, we managed to do it again, but this was fairly stupid.
Hang on. So were you on the side of a heli or out the back? Because I've done both. Stupid as well as a 17,
Yeah,
18
no,
year
on the
old
side,
for a
on
stunt.
the ski panel, the landing
Yeah.
panel, jumped off. Yeah.
Yeah. On your bike.
Yeah. On the, but
I've,
I was one foot on the
yep.
ski panel, holding the bike, and we put the bike out of the alley, and we jumped off in the center of the volcano, inside the crater of the volcano. So
I
this
didn't do
was silly.
I didn't do a volcano, but I did onto a granite rock. But we put a piece of wood on the side strut so that I could balance, and then one pedal off. You couldn't pay me to do that now.
No, but
There's no ways.
So I'm glad that we're finishing the talk on the fact that we are both as stupid at each other. That's the good news.
I thought we'd connect on something. It's not the World Champs titles. I don't have any of those, but I certainly did some stupid shit along the way. But Fab, I think we could chat forever. Maybe we'll have a round 2 and dissect some racing at some point. Man, thanks. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I look forward to having a nice casual beer, because people think you were so serious, and I like to tease you about the skin suit. I've also worn one. I like to say I was forced to wear one, but at World Champs, I chose it. I wanted my result, my personal best at World Champs, so I put the skin suit on. The worst thing about skin suit, in my mind, not to mention you feel like you're riding down naked, is if you go for a pre-race nervous pee and you don't get it quite correct, and it's quite awkward to get everything back in there. I have had a leakage. Yeah, but I've had a leakage going to the start line where I was like, oh dear, it looks like I've pissed myself, and I'm on worldwide TV now in the start gate. So not ideal.
Gotta pay out. Gotta pay attention. Cool.
Awesome, Fab. I don't know if the guys need to follow you along. Where should they? Obviously, they can follow the Canyon Collective and your social media. You active at all, or you kind of?
Yeah, we try to keep people updated, and the main page is the Canyon Collective, or you see my page on Instagram. We try to do quite a lot, and also some track know-how and lines on the page at races with some GoPro to try to give people a bit of insights.
Okay.
My main goal through the general communication I have is really to share my passion and my knowledge with people, to try to make our sport accessible and understandable for everyone. So feel free to reach out, and it was definitely great to have a good chat like this. And hopefully we have a casual beer, as you say, at races.
And as we sign off, is your way of helping athletes by beating them when you test? No. It doesn't seem good for their confidence. Doesn't seem good for their confidence. Oscar Seiss once did that to me as well, the bastard.
Yeah, I think it's important sometimes to tell them when the pace is not high enough on testing or on training. But I think they know that when I am around, even off the bike, they have to give 100% of themselves, and they're learning how to do it. And and we are lucky to have very professional athletes around us, which is fantastic. So, but yeah, I do love to tease them, but not anymore. Like the pace is too low now.
Yeah, but I think they'll thank you in the long run. If you say, look, you think you need to test at a higher pace, they're like, well, you come and do it. It's like, okay, well, no ego aside, I think the pace can be higher. And if you're able to deliver that, respect to you, man.
I think I'm very proud nowadays of the very good relationship I have with all the athletes. Obviously, above the friendship, there is a strong mutual respect where they know that I am here for them and I do that for them. It's true for the brands and it's true for my athletes, and they know that when I'm around, I give 100% of myself. So they are respectful for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks to you, Fab. Everyone should follow along. I hope they enjoyed it. And one request: if you enjoyed it, please share this episode with a friend. I think everyone can benefit from all those crazy nuggets of knowledge that he's dropped. And a super interesting stat is it looks like 60 to 70% of the people that consume a lot of this content are not subscribed on YouTube. So that'll help us get more amazing guests like Fab. So till the next one, I hope you enjoy the ride. Cheers, guys.